let's move on to this. So pretty much we were just talking about this subject, but I want to get to what Richard Hart actually said about it. So following up with the whole HEX thing. So a few days ago on the 14th, he said, and I DM'd this to you, Ewok, if you want to bring up the tweet. I just sent it to you a minute ago. But this was back 5 days ago. So Richard followed up kind of the tirade that he went on the weekend before that by saying Hexicans are living the dream that migrated from Ethereum to PulseChain. Look at the liquidity, look at the fees. Heck, EHEX even has more liquidity in PulseX than Uniswap. Look at the JPEG and look at the gas fees, $319 versus 4 cents at that time. $35 million of liquidity versus like 1 million. You guys moved all the liquidity to PulseX. You guys sold into what was left, but y'all blame a tweet instead of yourselves. He's becoming Florida Richard in this one. Welcome to the consequences of your actions. The choice was obvious, which is why so many people made the right one. Maybe in the bull market, EHEX will get pulled along, but the higher its price, the more economic energy will be lost to ETH fees. And that energy lost could have been more coins bought. TLDR, y'all are blaming a tweet because y'all moved all the liquidity and sold into what was left because you wanted to move to the beautiful shining city on the hill, Hex on PulseChain. The sooner you take responsibility for your actions or realize it's market forces, the better it'll be for you. Probably blaming guys that held while everyone else sold. Hex has quite a few trades stronger now than it did a few years ago. There's only so many people in this world that actually care about you and want to see you do well, and I'm one of them. Not financial advice. Past performance does not guarantee future. Yeah. So what do you make of that? I think, and he hadn't even a better tweet, I think, over that previous weekend. He had just that meme of whatever show that is, where it's just showing that basically investors all shot down EHEX and then blamed Richard Hart for it. So, what do you make of this tweet? How do you kind of analyze that? And do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well, it's hard, when you're as loud as he is, not loud, but when you have as many followers, and you say one thing, yeah, he didn't click the button. Did he do it the right way? Well, I don't know. I mean, why would you wait so long? First of all, I mean, I guess you do have to wait to see, right, where the markets are going. But you would think, he was definitely watching Twitter back. Maybe, he was still tweeting then, I believe. He just didn't say anything. So I kind of thought this probably should have been handled a long time ago. Again, it's going to be forgotten about in 3 weeks, maybe a month.
Yeah.
Everybody will they'll move on. I don't think he did anybody bad. I think he's trying to protect the little guys. He doesn't want to see the economic energy going into ETH chain when it could be going into PulseChain, where everything gets pulled up, right? Not just one coin. So I get it. I mean, but again, people reacted by emergency end staking and doing these things where, again, what if a big whale decides to jump in? What if there's, eventually the BankX liquidity gets eaten through and things kind of take off? Who knows? Like, I get onboarding new people into PulseChain and all that good stuff, but exactly, he didn't push any buttons. I think people overreacted by what he said, and it's just emotional damage. The emotional damage kind of guy. So that's all it is. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. People need to be responsible for their actions and not blame other people. So that's the bottom line.
Because Stone Cold said so. Thank you. Perfect.
That's right.
And then also today, so I wanted to bring this up too. So he updated the hex.com verb, not he, somebody updated the hex.com verbiage on the market choosing hex. So basically, I forget exactly how it said, but the hex.com website got updated. Some updates were made to PulseX as well. That and I was actually messing with it. It does seem way faster. So some things were done there as well. But I guess I guess what do you make of the website being updated? I'm going over my notes and what I wanted to talk about here. And again, like we already said, people are kind of talking in black and white terms about it, no nuance in the conversation. Um, let's just get into the Twitter stuff, I guess, too, and strategies around taking time off from it, because it's just been pretty untenable the last few days. I think over the weekend it was probably the worst, when I know you and I both totally checked out of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
talk about that, because we've seen that before, not just in the PulseChain or Hex ecosystem, but in crypto Twitter. I mean, Twitter all over. It doesn't matter what silo you're in. But yeah, it just has gotten. We are a nation of mentally ill people. I mean, that's just never been more clear, I think, than the last couple of years anyway. But you're seeing it with all this right now. Some of it's understandable. People might have life savings in some of this stuff, and it goes down, and they get emotional and all these things, and I understand that. But for our own mental health, or anybody's own mental health, you got to check out. And I know it's very hard to do sometimes, because you're getting the notifications, you want to see what's going on. There's, massive changes here and there constantly, but you're just going to be best served getting away from it. So talk about some strategies that you kind of use for that Ewok, because we were talking about a couple of people off the air before we got on that I honestly feel bad for, because you can tell that their entire day is just spent to try to get in little battles and little wars with people. And I just don't understand, like, what life do you even have at that point? But yeah, anyway, well, what do you do when times like that?
Well, I get away. So, I'm the type of person where I don't like drama. I try to avoid it at all costs in my regular life. And I do the same thing on X, on Twitter. So I use the mute button a lot. I I I try not to say anything, because a lot of times people will either take you out of context, or try to speak for what you were trying to say instead of what you actually said, and it just starts an argument. And I really think there's just you're right. There are so many unhappy, unhealthy, not unhealthy, but unhealthy minded people out there,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe aren't sure what their next move is, right? They probably overinvested. They didn't listen to the don't invest more than you can lose, because this can all go to zero. Because it really can. You know, you saw what one tweet did from a founder that a lot of people respect, right? I mean, there was a lot of things that happened. So there are things that can go bad, and I agree with you. I feel really bad for the ones that you know weren't in before the fork, that only bought the EHEX, and they just saw their bags get kind of pummeled. So I do feel for them, um, but I'm also seeing a lot of them come around too, and understand that that was the decision that they made, and now it's time to pivot. Hang on, don't capitulate completely, because you could still salvage a good bit of that. But you know how do you handle it? You've got to get away from it. You've got to read books. You've got to at least look at yourself. The only way to really fix it is to fix yourself, right? I mean, I hate to say personal development. There's a lot of books out there that will help you, um, how to win friends and influence, or what is it?
Yeah,
How to
Dale Carnegie. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah,
There's some books out there that really help you take things. How you say them really matters, right? So,
yeah.
um, there's just how to win friends and influence people is the book, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of steps you can take. But honestly, the most healthy one is just getting away from it. You've got to unplug yourself every once in a while. And I see people on there all the time. Every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they're tweeting something, or picking a battle with somebody, or just arguing to argue. It gets tiring. And I use the mute button a lot for things like that. I don't want to see it. So it
Yeah.
helps my feed become more positive and more normalized, where I see more discussions happening rather than arguments. I see ideas being bounced back and forth, things like that. It's just a lot healthier. And when you start reading that, you become more positive yourself. So it really rubs off, and it works. So, but again, the most important thing you can do is take breaks, get away from it, go talk to people, go do something with your kids if you have children. You're not going to get that time back. There's a lot of more important things that you could be doing than sitting around arguing with other adults on Twitter.
It actually becomes comical whenever you get out in the real world and do other things. Like, I was out with my son all day on Sunday, and a couple of times I came back to, later that day to look at Twitter for a second. I was like, what is going on with these people? Like, it's just like, what are you doing? And I'm not trying to do that whole thing where it's like, oh, I've got a family. What life do you have, or anything like that? I just mean, it's like, you're just bored. Like, you're clearly just bored, and maybe trying to get engagement money from Twitter by starting fights with people and stuff like that, which I think is very probable. But which, to each their own, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
But it's definitely good to take a time off. Like I said, this is a bull market dip. These are ones that we really just shouldn't be worrying about. And again, if the candles weren't red, people wouldn't be stressing out about this stuff as much. So,
right,
it is what it is.